In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Mary, Mother of the Church and our Mother, present our prayer of thanksgiving to your Son. Beg from him the graces we need to be faithful disciples who follow him with enthusiasm and joy. May our witness to the love of God bear fruit in our archdiocese, parishes, homes, and hearts. Teach us to be God's joyful witnesses, to radiate Christ in all that we do, and so that all people might know, love, and follow your Son through this life and into the next. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, first of all, thank you, Father Robin, for hosting this. This has been a long week for you. This is the fourth one of these sessions. I participated in the full session on Monday, and I found it to be very, very helpful. But likewise, because this is my fourth presentation too, I wanted to make certain that on all four occasions that what you hear from me is the very same thing. And so I prepared a script for myself, a text for myself. But first of all, I want to welcome you to this very important virtual presbyteral convocation. I begin by thanking you for your perseverance and ministry among the people of God in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati during this unusual year. I know that it has been extremely challenging. I am deeply grateful for the many ways in which you have adapted and continue to work tirelessly to radiate Christ through your dedication and service. These days, too, we look back with gratitude as we celebrate nearly 200 years of the Catholic faith in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. We look forward with great hope to our third century. As the priests and laity have throughout the past 2 centuries, we are called to discern and to bring the radiance of Christ's love and mercy to the people throughout the Archdiocese, and to respond to the spiritual and temporal needs of those in our parishes, schools, and other institutions. For that reason, it is now time for us to enter into a new phase of pastoral planning, through which we hope to build and sustain parish communities that celebrate the love of God in the Eucharist and the sacramental life of the Church, to form people to live as faithful disciples, and to radiate Christ through service to our neighbors. You might ask, why must we go through another planning process? One of the things that I have heard from many of you in the past years is that we have to move from maintenance to mission. No truer words could be spoken. The fall 2020 CARA Bulletin reports on a recent study that shows that since 2007, religious practice has declined more significantly in the United States than in any other of the 48 countries for which they have data. If we are to form people to live as missionary disciples, our parishes need to be vibrant, strong communities of faith. Yet in the present situation, many of you find it necessary to spend a disproportionate amount of your time literally concerned about maintenance. Not just one parish building and parish campus, but many church buildings, schools, parish centers, and campuses. This is taking a spiritual, physical, emotional, and psychological toll on the well-being of many of our brother priests. We need to take intentional steps to rightly order our investments of financial and human capital by finding ways to put more into ministry and less into buildings and grounds. Why now? Well, it seems to me we have no option. While we have been blessed these past few years with an increase in the number of men ordained to the priesthood and in seminary formation, we have even more priests who are at or beyond retirement age who are still serving as pastors. Moreover, religious communities have informed me that they may not be able to minister in the Archdiocese at the same level as they have in the past. And finally, the decline in religious practice that I referenced earlier means that we need to assess whether some of our parishes fall short of the vitality we need and want. In the recent Vatican instruction, the pastoral conversion of the parish community in service of the evangelizing mission of the Church, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI is quoted as saying, "The parish is a beacon that radiates the light of faith and thus responds to the deepest and truest desires of the human heart, giving meaning and hope to the lives of individuals and families. I am struck by this image of the parish as a beacon of Christ's light, radiating Christ through his Eucharistic presence, radiating Christ through the word of God proclaimed in the liturgy and on the lips of our people in prayer, radiating Christ through priests who stand in persona Christi with deep awareness of the sacred responsibility we bear, and radiating Christ through our people as they gather and are sent forth as the body of Christ. As Pope Benedict notes, the parish that is a beacon of light responds to the deepest and truest desires of the human heart. That is what is missing in the lives of so many in our world today. Some recognize the ache in their heart, but do not know where to go to find relief. Many seek a life of purpose, and yet they think that they can find meaning on their own. Even those currently active in our parishes need to be drawn into a deeper encounter with the Lord that will change and transform them so that they can live and grow in faith at home, in their workplace, and in the wider world. Some of you may be wondering why we need to hire outside consultants for this project. Is this a necessary expenditure? In my opinion, it is. In the final analysis, the guidance of professionals who have experienced this process in other dioceses will enable us to use best practices and avoid the hidden landmines that would ultimately cost us more in time and money. We cannot do this without one another. The planning process will require us to invest much more than money, but also prayer, time, and reflection in order to ensure that we are prepared for the future as fully and prudently as possible. I ask you, please take ownership of this effort and give your full heart and mind to it. You should know that this planning process will be the top priority for the entire pastoral center over the coming years. In a special way, the Office for Pastoral Planning has been established not only to develop and guide this process, but also, most importantly, to offer you the support needed along the way. I wish to thank all who have been involved in previous planning processes. You'll note that I speak of the process we are now entering as a new phase of planning. This process, which we call Beacons of Light, builds on the 3 previous planning processes for the Harvest, Ministry 2000, and Futures Project. I also thank the Presbyteral Council and the Priestly Life Committee, whose leadership has guided us thus far. I am very grateful to our archdiocesan deans and the priests who have served on various work groups related to this project. Your time and talent will ensure that Beacons of Light lives up to its name. Thanks to each of you for your commitment to bring this process to life, and through it to bring our people to know and love our Lord, radiating the light of Christ in every aspect of their lives. I invite you to envision parishes that are beacons of light. Hold this vision in your mind and in your heart in those moments when leading your people through this time of change becomes difficult. Remember this intention as you prepare to celebrate Mass. Invite your people to offer their gifts and resources to create communities of faith that are beacons of light throughout the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. I conclude by quoting from the Vatican instruction that I have referenced earlier. In speaking about the need for the pastoral conversion of our parishes, it states, "In this way, the Christian community makes our Lord's words their own, as they spur us to put out into the deep, trusting in the Master as we pay out the nets in the assurance of hauling a large catch." Once again, to all of you, thank you for participating in this convocation, and likewise, thank you for your commitment to move this forward in our archdiocese for the benefit of our people and the benefit of our priests. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. I do wish we could be doing this live and be all together, but unfortunately, the Zoom is going to have to do. So would appreciate your sticking with me. My hope is that I don't have any technical difficulty here, which I'm unfortunately well known for. So hang with me if we do, we'll move through it. Firstly, I have to thank the Archbishop for all of his support, for his remarks as we open here today. And thank all of you, those who are on the staff for the planning. If you're not aware, of course, we have Rob Rock, who is the director for the planning office, and then Lisa Anslinger and Jeremy Helms, who have other roles in the department, are also a major part of this because of their backgrounds and their abilities. I've asked them to, to help make this happen. So it's a very important day that we find ourselves on here in order to sort of kick this all off. Um, one of the things that I've been myself thinking recently, actually for the last couple of months, just has to do with I think how afraid so many of us are, including myself, really fearful of what's coming upon us with the future we face. How are we going to be able to do this? Just fearful of all the various intricacies of what the planning is going to take, what this will do to our people. I'm hopeful that it lifts them up and they certainly come to see the beauty in all of this and the possibilities. But in our fearfulness, there's some worry because fear, of course, can cause some of the uh, worst things to happen amongst men in the way we treat one another. And I would hope that all of us as priests could perhaps keep this kind of a thing in our prayer and be seeking intercession so that it doesn't creep into what we're trying to be about. I think Jesus said it best, be not afraid. John Paul II certainly hung his entire papacy on that. And FDR even shared one with us, the nothing to fear but fear itself words from so many years ago. All of these reminders that, uh, we can't let fear get us down. So I throw that out there as we begin. I think it's very much, somewhat of a clarion call as we start this all out. What I want to try to do now going forward here today is to extrapolate essentially some of what the Archbishop said to put some more flesh to it. And I also think it's important that we hang on to some other important words that he mentioned here, that we enter into this with full hearts and minds. I think any one of us knows that the three previous iterations of planning, if we can go on to the next slide, um, for the harvest, which was in '84, Ministry 2000 Futures Project, which was completed in 2005. Many of us that are listening in here today, and myself included, have been involved in all three of these. We know that each of them had important uh, things to provide for us at the time that were made, and obviously we are now on our fourth iteration of planning, and we're building upon these. They were good at the time they were developed, but circumstances change as they did in between the timing on each of these first three. So today I want to provide a bit of what the state of affairs, so to speak, of the Archdiocese is with regards to our numbers of priests, etc. So this is these were all hallmark initiatives that have gotten us, they've brought us this day. But if you think about this, this is 35 plus years of planning and working through what we knew from the very beginnings we were faced with. And it just seems now that things are speeding up a little bit. Perhaps we're taking care of some things, some issues that maybe we could have done in the last situation and were put off, but now we're going to have to do these things. And all I guess, as I've already said, because the circumstances change over time. Uh, so if we can go to the next of our, so what you see here in front of you, I'm not going to go into specifics here. I just want to really focus on the beginnings of this. There's been some talk out there, which I guess there always is, unfortunately, that what have you people been doing down at the pastoral center the last few months? And this sort of outlines what has been going on. There's been a lot of work that has been involved in this, and I'm very thankful again for the staff who've been involved. We've had quite a few priests who have joined in various groupings that you'll see here in a little bit to help us begin this planning. So I think most everybody here, not all, but most everybody participated in a survey that John Gooding and Jane Meyer did back in 2015, I believe it was, at least the survey of the pastors of that time. And that survey, as I've already mentioned at least once, as the transition was happening between Father Len Wanke and myself, kind of got lost, and then we rediscovered it at the end of 2018. And after reading it, really, realized that we had some work ahead of us to change the things that weren't working, to build upon again the stuff that was working. And so we called a meeting of those who were able to get together in January of 2019 and talked about this. And I felt that it was a very, very positive meeting. But the one thing that I came away from that meeting with was a great sense of urgency to take us to the next place we need to get. And even since that date, so many things have changed that, have us constantly having to be paying attention to with regards to our circumstances today. But the takeaway from, again, that 2019 meeting was the urgency, and we all need to be about that. And that then, of course, drove us to the formation of this framework, working with the Presbyteral Council and the Priestly Life Committee that is answerable to the council. We came up with a framework which was presented at the Convocation there, what was it, November, a year or so ago. And that framework left us with one important target, and that was the model that we are employing with regards to one parish, one pastor. And so our planning going forward is based on that. We're hopeful of being able to get to that someday. But that of course, getting to that final target of one pastor, one parish is going to be, it's going to happen in different ways in different places. It's going to take longer periods of time in some places than others. So this is a plan here that's going to unfold over time. It's not all, we figure out what the plan is and then it all happens at once. That's not the expectation at all. But, there is a complexity in all of this change, and we're hopeful that, at least I am very hopeful that we can all cooperate in this and not let the fear get to us in the process. So if we can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk primarily today about the why and the how. The what are things that will happen later. This is just a synopsis of a number of other slides that I'll go a little bit deeper with here. So let me just go very quickly over each of these. The why. As Archbishop mentioned, there is this call to move from maintenance to mission. Father Matt Robin was the one who kind of coined that for us at that January meeting, January of 19. And you could feel the energy in the room when he said it. It's what everyone is really looking forward to, I think, and well, recognizing that we are stuck in a place right now with the maintenance. too many campuses and not enough travel time and all of those things, and we're not really able to be father. And I've heard a number of priests say that. We're more like the CEO or the COO or something rather than the spiritual leader of the parish as we're called to be. And there's this yearning to be able to be, the dad to everybody, the spiritual father in the ways that we're called to be. So the missionary discipleship, that's the why. And I will emphasize this a number of times because I think this is, if we're going to get stuck anywhere, and I don't mean that in a negative way, if we're going to get stuck in the way of thinking about this, it needs to be the why. Because it is all about the centrality of the mission that we're called to be about. Yes, the priest shortage is a why in this as well. But if we're going to emphasize that, I just think we're going to go down a negative road. The why needs to be about the mission that we want to see as the plans come to fruition. So very quickly here, every Catholic should have an opportunity to belong to a parish that forms them to embrace the call to missionary discipleship. I think we all want beauty and joy and goodness in our parish communities, and that's the end result of all of this. People formed to live and nurture their faith at home. The how, and this I will spend a bit of time on here. Let's just read through this. The 65 to 75 groupings of parishes, and yes, for those of you who may not have heard this before, that is fewer than what we had planned with that Futures project. And there are reasons for it that I'll explain here shortly. Each grouping led by a pastor who shepherds the community to radiate Christ, and each grouping develops a pastoral plan to grow in communion and live in mission as a community of faith. So we have one big pastoral plan for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, but each parish will be working on their own, and that will describe how each grouping of parishes that eventually become a parish will move towards this. And then the what, again, I'm not going to spend much time other than right here on this slide. The planning principles and parameters, and if others feel that there's something that should be added to this, this is all still very, very flexible. Centrality of Mass and the sacraments, the combining of staffs and pastoral councils, our Mass schedules, which I think is a preeminent issue that probably needs to be handled very quickly. Fiscal and ministerial stewardship, the move towards one parish, one pastor, and of course, the schools piece in all of this as a ministry of the parish. So very, very important principles and parameters as we move forward. If we can move now to the next slide. So the why. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, this is the key to everything, absolutely everything. We have to respond to the current urgent need for change. And I think as I go forward in here, I'm hopeful that I'll describe, some of what that's about. Moving from maintenance to mission, and forming and sustaining vital mission-driven parishes. And, we know that we've got a lot of great mission-driven parishes out there. People are trying and really working at this. And in fact, we've got some fabulous parishes out there. But we also have some places that, life is sustained by the sacraments, certainly, but are we doing much more beyond that? Are we being attractive to those who may want to be Catholic but then find themselves drifting away because something else is going on in churches that are providing mission-driven involvement, etc. So I think it's important also to understand that this why and not remaining focused on it is a primary reason why plans fail. And yes, I'm going to go to the business world because it is a good model for us. Almost 70% of pastoral plans fail because focus is not kept on the reason for doing it. So as you know, as people move forward to implement the plan, they get all tied up in the pieces of the implementation, forgetting what it is really all about. And so we can't forget this. We have to remember that the why is about moving from maintenance to mission, to getting to that place where we have where all of our parishes are fabulous, you know, and doing great things, and doing the things that their people, that feed their people, and that help their people to go out and to be Christ in the world that you know, we're all called to go out into and affect. Uh, so the why is extremely important. You know, maybe we can look back at some of what hasn't gone quite right in the previous plans that were put together, and think about, did we lose track? Did we lose focus on that why? And you know, I think we could probably realize and see that is what happened in many cases. So if we can move on now, I'm going to try to go a little bit further with the why. So the why now. I don't think I need to read through this, but I want to add to it, certainly. You can see there the priest data, and I have to give great accolades to Father David Endres. Father Endres has spent a huge amount of time putting together actuarial charts that show us all of these things. He has spent time, you know, after we as priests send our sheets in the fall, looking at, you know, who's retiring or who may be retiring soon. He spent a lot of time with the religious orders to try to get some sense of, you know, what is going to be happening with them. And of course, in all of this, what is going to be happening to them, it's also what's going to be happening to us. And one never knows when there may be something else that comes into play. So keep in mind that these numbers are always changing. I think it's very, very important to point out that we have, I think, we have a very wonderful seminary producing great guys. I mean, all of those that I've, you know, been able to associate with, certainly down here at the cathedral, they're coming down all the time to help out with liturgies and whatnot. They're very, very fine young men, and the priests that we've been turning out in recent years are great guys. And our seminary does have a lot of students for Cincinnati, but we are also in that place where rather large classes of men from the 70s, late 60s and early 70s and whatnot are retiring. And so we're caught in this, literally, between the rock and the hard place. So we've been talking about all the, you know, how full the seminary is these last few years. And we've not been talking about how many guys are retiring. And so our people are going to be caught, you know, wondering what's going on. I thought, Father, you said that, you know, the seminary was full. You know, we're in that place now where this is really going to come to the fore. If you look down in the pastor projections, we presently have 149 diocesan priests. The 102 pastors are diocesan pastors. There are another 7 religious orders. So by this time, we were supposed to be down to 100 regions. We presently have 109. And so, you know, you can see there that we have about 40 other priests that are available as be they newly minted or extern priests, retired priests who are helping us in major ways. So the numbers are difficult. Now, let me share some things with you to kind of give you an idea of what has happened over the years. Some months ago, I found a Claris from 1970 here at the cathedral, and I just started looking through it. And what I found in 1970, the Archdiocese of Cincinnati had 259 parishes. Today, we have 212. We had 167 schools. Today we have 108. And we had, now these are both religious as well as diocesan, we had 834 priests, and they were evenly divided, about half and half. So huge numbers. Um, we have 149 diocesan priests and not too many active religious priests at this point. So, this kind of uh, provides us with a picture of why we are now doing what we're doing. The priests available for pastoral assignments, you can see there over on the left. So these are based on Father Andres's extrapolations and charts. And so where we're going right now with this planning is we're looking at 65 to 75 possible, what we're currently calling regions, but what we want to begin very much calling parishes. So, we're really kind of shooting for the low end of that, the 65, just keeping in mind that who knows what may happen between now and 2026. Who may get ill that we're not expecting to get ill, and other things that can occur. Um, this spring we will ordain 7 new men, but we have more retirements than that. And one of the things that this, the piece of the plan that we've been able to work on here with this is, our hope is by getting down to that 65 to 75 number, that there will be more parochial vicars available, and that especially amongst our young newly ordained, they will have more time in a parish situation before they have to become a pastor. They certainly know how difficult it's been for them to, after a year or 2 or 3 at best, suddenly become a pastor and not really feel prepared for that. So that's the picture that we have painted for us. Now, the real crux of this is that by July 1st of 2022, Father Andres says that we do not have enough pastors to man the regions that we currently have. So 109 regions. By 2022, we're at a place where we don't have enough men to cover. Then by 2026, we finally get down to this number in reality that hopefully we will, be able to maintain. With the numbers in the seminary, if they continue to stay where they are, it's still the 2040s before we get to a place where there could possibly even be 1 priest per parish that we have now. And so, we got a long way to go, and we've got to do things now in order to provide our people with, what they're asking for and what they need and what we hope to be able to do for them. If we go to the next slide. So in addition to the availability of diocesan priests, we also have the decline in, and also religious priests. We also have the decline in religious practice that we're all very much aware of. A change in demographics. I've never been assigned to the North Country or out east where there's lots of farming that goes on. But I have talked to some of those people. They've been so proud to be able to send their youngsters away to college someplace, and those kids then, they don't come back to the farm. They're off to the big city someplace, or moving to a big city and out into the suburbs. Those kinds of things are happening. They're moving south. The church in the south in this country is growing. The migration that is happening. Our growth is primarily from Hispanic immigrants to this area. And if you're not aware, in the Archdiocese, according to the last census, there were about 95,000 persons of Hispanic origin in our Archdiocese. And we know we're not serving them well, that we have a lot of work to do there. Um, and folks move out of the inner cities. That here in downtown Cincinnati, or not downtown, but in Cincinnati, um, one of the Father Alex McCullough, when he became pastor of the Wyoming region, he did a little study. He found uh, within 20 minutes of St. Vivian, which is on Winton Road in Cincinnati, just north of where Spring Grove Cemetery is, within 20 minutes of St. Vivian, there were 56 parishes. Um, we can't keep doing this, and I think we all know that. But again, the true why is about parish vitality. And while we recognize that the shortage of priests is causing us to have to do what we're doing, the bottom line is the vitality that can happen when we have larger numbers of people gathering, when we have the kind of funding that the stewardship that helps to fund the sort of ministries that that are vital to life in our parishes. Father Chris Werlin remarked last week. Um, he said this whole planning process equates with the term surviving to thriving. And if we can go to the next slide now, we'll talk a little bit about that. Can we go to the next slide? There we go. So our plan moving forward actually consists of two pieces: the strategic plan and the pastoral plan. The surviving piece is this strategic planning, and the thriving piece is the pastoral planning that will take place. And both of these are on the next slide, and don't go to that yet. You will see the pastoral planning side of this, and they're both happening at the same time, which they must in order to get us to where we want to go. So again, the goal with all of this is vital parish life. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation here, folks have been wondering what we've been doing, and a lot has been happening. COVID did put a little bit of a roadblock in our way, and I'm not using that as an excuse whatsoever, because the roadblock was simply our worry about, do we have the money to fund what we need to do? And that has been resolved and taken care of. And so, that was the catalyst then in our being able to move forward with this. But the planning was still happening. One way or another, we were going to have to do this. And we felt it extremely important that we have consultants to assist us with this. A small planning office cannot bring this off, so to speak. So it's about the team that we have in the pastoral center. It is about the consultants, but it is also about so many others who, many of whom we've already drawn into this, and others who will be drawn into it over time. I also think it's important to point out here, because the question constantly arises as I'm talking with people about this, where is the laity in this? The laity is integral to this. This is not a plan coming down from on high. This is a plan that has to have grassroots, and the laity have to be involved in it. This is not a plan that's already done, as Matt already mentioned, and is being presented to you. It is a plan that you, as pastors, as priests, and your people and your staffs together will be developing for what works in your area. The data collection that's taking place right now, that is to help us, fashion some models based simply on statistics. But we also know that there are situations that are endemic to your location, and so nothing is set in place. That all has to be worked with, and so please know that it is it's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, and we've got a ways to go here yet. As the Archbishop mentioned, we are just at the beginning. As you can see, the arrow here with the strategic planning shows that we are right in the midst of the research. You can see the modeling, the deaneries, regions, and schools. And another thing to point out here is that another piece of this that I've heard is in some places, the regions as they're set up right now, again, the eventual parishes, aren't working. You know, can we look at something different? And yes, you can. Everything's on the table. The Archbishop has stated that. Even to the redrawing of deanery lines, if that is necessary. You know, if the parish and the deanery over would be better with one in the next deanery, then the lines will get drawn to make that fit properly, so that, you know, we don't have one location in one deanery and another in another. So know that it can all be worked with. Confidential consultation, again, Priestly Life Committee, Presbyterial Council, Catholic Schools, Chancery. So after the modeling takes place, then, you know, there'll be input from these various groups as to what happens going forward. The informing, the development of communication support during an informed public information phase. Now, that's the general public, but you will have already drawn the laity, you know, the folks that you work with all the time in your parishes and whatnot, into what will happen to make the parish occur. The modeling approval, then, of course, Archbishop, and then an implementation. And right now, yeah, that's July of 2022. We will begin some implementation with some model parishes that are, or situations that are ready to go. We can go to the next slide, which is the pastoral planning, or the thriving side of this. Again, the communication is happening right now, the why now, the engagement, formation of a planning team, the process development, the principles of one parish, one pastor being kept in the forefront, and the parameters. As I mentioned, we have the parameters that we think are pretty good, and that was that what. But if you have other ideas, you know, again, nothing is off the table. Pastoral priorities, the parish vitality, leadership, worship sacraments, stewardship, evangelization, and love in action. And then there will be training with all of this for the deans. There's already been very little bit of that, but there will be more priests, lay facilitators, parishioners, and the leaders who will help to make this happen. And then the cohorts are explained there. Once we have affirmed regions, or again, what will become parishes, the pilots will begin to take place, and then the implementation beyond that. So we can go to the next slide. These are what, in our listening, we believe are the three biggies that the priests have been asking for. One pastor, one parish. The notion of you know, surviving, going from surviving to thriving, from maintenance to mission, and the involvement of the laity, and all of those are right up front. All of those are very much part of all that we've done thus far and all that we have to do going forward. If we can go to the next slide, and this is where I will close out with all of you. You can see here the groups that have been formed and have been working. Pastoral Planning Oversight Group, you can see the membership there, priests, laity, staff. Our statuses and deans have been integral in this, and they will be in a very major way helping to make this happen. You know, they're the ones with boots on the ground and knowing what is happening in the wider range beyond a pastor's viewpoint with a parish, of course. And then we have the strategic planning task group. Again, there are a few priests on that, and some others that we put together. Now, all of these groups, you know, are pretty much, I think anybody who has ever tried to run a group knows that groups can get too big. But if any of you feel that there's some really key person that you think might be of value in one of these groups, please let us know. And most especially for the pastoral planning task group, which is just now being put together. The strategic and the pastoral planning piece are going to be very, very important as we begin to move through this task. So that's everything that I have to present at this point. I'll be sticking in here and listening in to what else is going on. Um, and I just, I've been praying about this fear thing because it can grab hold of us and, can ruin our personal lives, can ruin our ministry, can ruin this effort that we're all supposed to be about. And I just ask that we all pray to be men and women of good cheer and move forward through this in charitable ways. So thank you all for listening. I look forward to the work that we'll all be about together, and hopefully it unfolds in a very fruitful way for us. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have a chance to be with you. I actually grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, right down the road from Cincinnati, so I was a Reds fan growing up, and then made many trips actually to Cincinnati as a boy, to Kings Island and various other places. So I feel a certain connection, even though I live in the suburbs of Chicago, to the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. And what I want to do is just take you through a few slides and then set you up to have a conversation with one another. Okay, so if we could see the next slide. Okay, let's begin with the Leadership Roundtable. As Father Jan said, we are an organization of laity, religious, and clergy. And what we basically do is to work throughout the United States and try to collect up the best, what we consider to be the best practices in leadership in the church, and then disperse them throughout. So we try to find what's working and make sure people know about it, and bring that to whoever we partner with. In this case, the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. A really key element of our work is to build the capacity of Catholic organizations with whom we partner. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that we are about disseminating best practices. We're about having you learn what we have learned throughout the country, and then leaving, so that you have built the capacity, and you don't need to have us continually around saying, "Will you do this for us? How would you say this?" Because and that in some cases means training specific staff or putting certain procedures in place. Variety of different things, but the point is that we are about empowerment is the bottom line. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just a little bit about me, having worked across the U.S. And with a dozen men's religious communities, by the way, as well, and over 100 church organizations. I've also served as a consultant to USCCB Committee on Communications. As a matter of fact, Archbishop Schnurr was coming on the committee as I was heading off of it. And I have a colleague with me in this work. Deacon Patrick Stokely, who's not on right now, but will be partnering with me throughout this work. And Patrick's worked across the United States as well, as you can see. Okay, we can move to the next slide. I want to begin with the instruction that was just came out this summer from the Vatican, because I think it's a great place for us to start. And I'm going to take the first sentence and the last sentence and we'll fill in the middle. Parish communities will find herein a call to we'll find a call for the proclamation of the gospel, right? What we're talking about here is the proclamation of the gospel. And to do that, in the middle tells us the part about how we do that. We go out of ourselves, we offer instruments for reform, even structural, which is what a part of what you're going to be about, in the spirit of communion and collaboration, encountering closeness, mercy, and solicitude, as Father Jan was just talking about the kind of kindness that we'll need to have. This will be hard work. It will be challenging. But if you remember that it's really about the proclamation of the gospel, and we're being asked to make these changes, The changes we're being asked to make are not a corporate restructuring. They're made to set you up as an archdiocese to better proclaim the gospel. And you'll need the qualities that are listed in the middle of the paragraph to help you get there. Okay? Okay. So let's just talk for a second about pastoral planning and then kind of what we have learned to be best practice. The standard approach to pastoral planning is that planning is a rational allocation of resources. Planning anywhere, pretty much in the United States, started after the Second World War, when what was learned about the huge need to have plans during the war came back and corporations incorporated those and they brought them in. And as dioceses began to plan, they looked to corporations for the model. And so it's just simply to say, let's rationally allocate what we have across what our needs are. And this led to, this was not best practice. I mean, at its extreme, and I'm aware of no diocese that has done this, but at its extreme, if you really wanted to be just rational about your resources and allocate them, you would simply look and say, what are our 10 biggest parishes or our 25 biggest parishes in the United States or in the archdiocese, and let's focus all of our resources there. It doesn't make, if I've got a parish with a 5,000 October count, and I've got a parish with a 200 October count, it doesn't make sense for me to be focused there. As a matter of fact, a business, if these were branch offices, would close those smaller branch offices. Okay, that's not best practice. And I'm aware of no diocese that's done that, but I am aware of dioceses that have not always taken on the best practice, which is the next thing that we'll say. The other thing I want to be very clear on is the work that Partners Edge is doing with all of the data and so forth. Please don't confuse that or think of it as rational allocation of resources. If you looked at the timeline or the kind of process that Father Jan put up, you would notice that there are several places for consultation, for input, for discernment to help get to the best outcome. All right. What we want to say is the best practice is the Catholic planning is a discernment process with multiple dimensions. Okay, and let's go and take a look at what that means. Okay, so when planning is Catholic, it begins by strengthening the communio. So the communio is a benefit of the process. As people participate in it, their communio, sense of communio deepens. The focus of Catholic planning is on the mission. So ultimately, you're trying to focus on the mission and align that communio to the missio. As a matter of fact, what you might think about is the two are on tracks moving towards one another to an intersection. Although even that's too linear, because there's a part that goes back and forth in this. They're consistently, as you talk more about the missio, the sense of communio deepens. So it's not even really fair to put it in and call it that. The third, and this is the discernment process, is the listening to the Spirit. Okay, the core process of Catholic of this process is prayerful discernment. So it's not rational allocation of resources, but it's prayerful discernment as you've gone through the process. And excuse me, just a second. So the core process here is discernment, not the rational allocation of resources. The fourth is a really, I think, important point. Those governed and those governing are converted to Christ. There's a conversion element to a process like this. if people are open to it. Now, we might be likely to, and I was when I first saw it, think, yeah, it's those people in the parishes. We just got to get them to change their hearts and minds, and then we'll be fine. Actually, what I've seen over the years is that when this works best, the people who go through a conversion experience are also the people in the central offices and the priests, because this requires a new way of seeing, a new way of leading, a new way of ministering, and that in itself requires a conversion process. So it has to be an openness to the conversion. And lastly, the pastoral leader is called by God to lead. Now, that's not just Archbishop Schnurr. That's all the priests who are on this call and have participated in this convocation. All the priests in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati are called to lead. And the leader experiences that vocational call to lead his community of faith. People will be coming to you and asking you all manner of questions, and you might say, well, I'm not the one who's leading this process, but as far as they're concerned, if you're the pastor of their parish, you're the most credible person that they're going to talk to, and they're putting you into a leadership role whether you want it or not. And you have two choices. You can step into the leadership role, or you can abdicate it, but then you're not really serving that person and helping them get the information. We'll talk about what happens if you don't know the information a little bit later, but there's a plan for that. We could advance to the next slide. So then, what is Communio? Communio is much more than just Community Plus, more than Community just turbocharged. Because sometimes people talk about Communio as if it is something that's just community with the God thing part of it. And I want to say what I'm putting up on the screen is not my own. I got it from Father John Carchi, who's the rector of the seminary at Mundelein outside of Chicago. Father Carchi says, hey, look, Communio actually arises at boundary points. And at those boundaries, we have the opportunity to experience true Communio. Okay, what's a boundary point? It's a place that you normally don't go past. But what happens when you encounter that and you are forced to cross it or encounter it, then what happens is, I'm reading the key signs, the second bullet, you experience a loss of control because you've gone across a border or a boundary that you normally wouldn't cross. And that experience grabs you by the collar and moves you to a place where there's no template. And a lot of your experience of going through this process is going to be one of experiencing no template. And there's no rule book, there's no playbook for how to do this. This happens in a diocese every 10 to 20 years. This then is God's MO. That's a quote from Father Carchi. Okay, what's our response? Our response is as much as we want to have control, is to realize we're not in control and embrace our poverty, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, to recognize that on our own, we don't have the answers. And so we have to shift our focus to being open and receptive, to embrace vulnerability, which opens possibilities we would not have otherwise considered. We're creating a space for God to create a way where there is no way. So Communio actually kind of erupts in our lives at different times. It comes in when we're not expecting it. In this case, it comes in through this planning process, which will create many border and boundary crossings where you'll find yourself not sure what to do and feeling that the only response, hopefully, is to recognize you're not in control and embrace your own poverty. You can go to the next slide. So, ultimately we can think of planning as a linear exercise. Assess the situation, create goals, execute the goals. But the experience of planning builds Communio, providing Catholics the opportunity to come together in prayer, build relationships, and discern. So as they're doing that stuff, of the planning process, they're also coming together with one another, building prayerful relationships and discerning. In the process, they encounter those boundaries and come to realize their poverty for their poverty and their need for God and for one another. Okay, all of this is happening during the planning process, where it's conscious or unconscious. We hope that it's conscious, so we can create opportunities to nurture communio in the midst of the task of planning, right? So there's this amazing thing that happens if we're open to it, to say, yeah, we're engaged in a planning process, and it's actually strengthening our communio. It's strengthening our connection to God. It's strengthening our connection to one another, because it's making it very clear that on our own, we can't do this. So we need one another and we need God. And that is the place where the communio gets strengthened and built. Okay. Okay, and then engaging laity. As I said, for Leadership Roundtable, this is an important piece, but for planning, this is an important piece. This kind of the standard approach is that clergy and archdiocesan staff lead planning, and lay volunteers support that planning. That's a nice model. Okay, the best practice we're seeing emerge is incredibly talented lay leaders will give significant time and money if they're invited into co-responsibility in the process. Okay, so let me give you with the next slide a little bit more detail. Okay, so the co-responsibility calls for a deep engagement of the laity in the planning process. Vibrant planning includes multiple means of soliciting input, so people don't just get a chance to fill out one survey, but looking for different ways in which people can be engaged, and not only inviting them to give input, but inviting them to be actually part of the planning process itself. Okay, that doesn't mean they run it, but it does mean that they take on significant roles. Things like helping with the communication strategy, and this draws on their expertise. Certainly in Cincinnati, you've got Procter & Gamble and a number of other places that have produced some highly talented people. And I'll talk about those in just a second, but inviting them into giving their input into a communication strategy. Mike Schaefer is ultimately going to write it, right? But giving their review, feedback, information, data analysis, facilitation and planning process gatherings. Many of them are highly skilled at these. And leadership development programs. You have very talented laity who have sat at the highest seats in their organizations, who are very familiar with how to develop and lead talent leaders. Let's go to the next slide. So some examples of lay leaders from other dioceses that we have encountered in our planning work, who have stepped forward to do incredible work. The former president of the American Medical Association. We had a series of 12 listening sessions. She went to every single one. The dean of a business school actually helped write the leadership development program. An Ivy League business school helped write the leadership development program for a major archdiocese. State Supreme Court Justice, a managing director for the Boston Consulting Group, who actually ended up being hired on to lead the planning process. A 3-star Army general, general counsel for a Fortune 100 company, who in the planning process spent, if I had to guess, close to 100 hours of her time helping with the planning process, and brought incredible skills. And then ultimately a donor who, as he became involved enough in the process, ended up giving $1 million to the planning process, once he was allowed to not just sit on the sidelines, but actually to come in and to truly be involved in the ways that some of these others were involved as well. Okay, so when we talk about co-responsibility of laity, it's not just, please show up or please sit on the committee. It's giving them real responsibility and drawing on the skills that they uniquely have. Okay.
Thanks, Father Matt, and thanks everybody for being part of this convocation today. For those of you that I haven't had a chance yet to meet, I'm Jeremy Helms, and I serve as the director of our Archdiocesan Office for Worship and Sacraments. But in addition to that work, I have done graduate study in organizational leadership and change management. And so I find myself in the position of talking about John Cotter's model, that is 8 steps to an effective change process. Some of you are already familiar with this model, so it won't be your first look at it, but certainly we hope it won't be your last, because we've decided to map our Beacons of Light change process to John Cotter's model. And so it's really important that we be familiar with it. I think one of the most important things for us as leaders in this change process is to always be communicating to those we lead where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Because often in the midst of this kind of a process, especially a multi-year process that has lots of layers, it will be really difficult sometimes for people to really have the right context. And it's essential that we're able to abstract up and help people remember where we are in this process. So I'd like to walk you through a little bit of it. Again, as Father Jan mentioned earlier, all of this will be available for you as early as tomorrow. And so you'll be able to dig more into the model, find more background, and be able to start using these materials to communicate with your staff and other parish leadership groups. Dr. Cotter is a business school professor, Harvard Business School, and he wrote this book in 1995, Leading Change. And since then, it has been used by thousands and thousands of organizations throughout the world, really, in a number of different contexts. And it's really adaptable in many ways. And one of the best parts about it is it's not linear, it's actually cyclical. And so I would encourage you, we've even tried to graphically represent it as a cyclical model, to not think about finishing step 1, check it off and never think about it again. But it's more, let's do step 1, let's start to do step 2. Well, we need to do a little bit more step 1, but we're ready to move to step 3 in this regard. We want to think of it as a cyclical model, and that's really important here. The first step in Cotter's model is about creating a sense of urgency. And this is where we find ourselves right now. I dare say that this is a group right here, and the 3 groups before you of your brother priests, we have the greatest sense of urgency about this issue. The people in the pews do not have this same sense of urgency, at least for the most part. Every time there's supposed to be Mass, Mass happens. The parish office is open when it's supposed to be open. For the most part, the roof doesn't leak. For the most part, the parking lot is paved. For the most part, things that are supposed to happen, happen. And so their experience of parish life is not one of urgency and a need for change. We know that, and we have to start building that sense of urgency among our leadership teams, our staffs, our pastoral councils, and ultimately with the people in the pews. It has been said that we should not let a good pandemic go to waste. So the silver lining in this cloud right now is that it allows us to bring some clarity to the kinds of structural deficiencies that are before us at this moment. Once we've fostered this sense of urgency, and Archbishop Schnurr has helped to create the beginning of this sense of urgency through the Radiate Christ pastoral letter. Once we have that sense of urgency created, it's about forming a guiding coalition. And that's also where we are right now. Of course, Archbishop Schnurr has authorized the Beacons of Light process and delegated Father Jan to execute it. And we have an oversight group with a couple of task groups, but there are roles for the Presbyteral Council and the Priestly Life Subcommittee of that council. Obviously, we've asked our archdiocesan deans to take a leadership role in a new way. We've engaged professional services, and there'll be lots of opportunities for people to contribute to this process overall. But the other important point is not just do we have an archdiocesan guiding coalition, you in your parish, you in your region, and in your deanery will need to begin forming guiding coalitions as well, made up of qualified and talented lay people who can help lead this process forward. So once we've created this sense of urgency and formed our guiding coalition, it's going to be critical that we're able to form a strategic vision. And we also find ourselves at this moment in that phase. We can continue to reflect upon Radiate Christ. We're starting to get data back from parishes, and soon we'll be developing priorities and parameters for the planning process. And those will serve as the vision for Beacons of Light. What do we want the future of the church in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati to look like? What's the vision? How do we communicate it then is the next step and Dr. Cotter's 4th phase. We have to not only communicate the vision, but we have to enlist others into this process. As I mentioned, we've asked the deans to accept new leadership responsibilities. And as pastors and vicars, we're going to equip you to lead these planning efforts in your parishes and regions. Archbishop Schnurr has already said that this is a top priority for the Pastoral Center staff, and so we're all at your disposal to help make this process successful. And we'll be training and equipping facilitators to lead the efforts. Communicating the vision is essential. We have to help people understand where it is we're going. We always have to begin with the end in mind. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but these are critical parts of the Cotter model. Cotter's fifth step in this 8-step process is about empowering others to act on this vision and enabling action. And so obviously you already do a lot of short-term planning in your parish, in your parochial school. There are always short-term plans underway. And the deanery-based strategic planning will continue. The parish groupings will be determined as part of the strategic planning process, and the pastoral planning process will continue as well. We're working very hard, and the Priestly Life Committee, in fact, is working very hard to create leadership development opportunities for you as priests. And so you'll stay tuned for some opportunities in that realm. But this will be about enabling action, equipping people in our parishes and regions to be able to take the next steps to actually move this process forward and realize the vision. The 6th step in Cotter's model is about creating, generating, and celebrating short-term wins. Father Jan already pointed up that many change processes fail. They fail for lots of reasons. One of the reasons that they fail, however, is that there's no celebration of short-term wins while we're working towards the long-term goal. In other words, we're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think that can be really deadly to a planning process. So it'll be really important for us as early as next summer, perhaps into next spring, to be talking about what are the short-term wins we can identify and celebrate. Guiding teams will be formed in each parish grouping, and there'll be some pilots. We've already mentioned that will be already underway in terms of this process. Conveniently, we'll be continuing to celebrate our bicentennial, so that will help us keep our spirits high as we generate and celebrate these short-term wins. But I encourage you as a leader in your parish, in your region, to always be helping people identify and celebrate the short-term wins. It helps us keep our momentum sustained as we move forward towards that longer range vision. Cotter's 7th step is about consolidating our improvements, sustaining the acceleration. I'm not a long distance runner, but people who are long distance runners always talk about those last 5 or 6 miles as a critical time where you have to be able to kind of sustain the acceleration, muster your strength, and finish strong. And it seems to me that this is really a critical piece. And so for us, we're assuming that towards the end of 2022, we're going to need to keep sustaining this acceleration that we've created. And these final configurations will have a timeline for implementation, which will take place in phases and waves. And parish groups will be continuing to develop pastoral plans. The final step is also critical. And in my experience, and I think other people who have studied institutional change would tell you, the hardest thing to do is actually make it part of your culture, to actually institute the change, to make it part of the new normal. Anybody who's been to business school has heard the expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the best strategy, even tactics in the world, but if you can't change the culture, you can't actually affect the kinds of change you want to affect. And so this is going to be a really important part for us to take these ideals, these norms, these aspects of the pastoral planning process and make them part of our culture here in the Archdiocese. And you see the kinds of things that will be hallmarks of a changed culture. What does it look like for us to live together and our parishes be beacons of light where we have vibrant and vital parish life? Again, these 8 steps are not meant to be linear. They're meant to be cyclical. And again, I think the most important thing we can do as leaders is to always be providing the context to the people that we're serving. Where have we been? Where are we? And where are we going? And so we always need to be able to abstract up and say, okay, well, here's where we are. We're in step 3. We're doing a little bit of step 4. We've done a little bit of step 2. How do we move forward? How do we take stock of where we are and how do we keep moving? So again, all of this will be available to you on the website. You'll get a link to tomorrow. And I would encourage you to continue to dig into this model, learn more about this, and hopefully it will be useful to you as you implement these plans in your own parish.
Okay, great. Good to have a chance to say a few more words. And in this particular piece I find to be one, we have found to be one that is absolutely crucial in diocese. And I want to just begin by asking just a couple basic questions. So if it's possible, there we go, right? I'd like you to just raise your hand, just physically for a second. Just keep them up so I can take a look. Raise your hand if you know what it means to be a change agent. And this isn't something you'd be expected to know, so no harm in if that's the case, right? So we've got some hands up, maybe a half or a little bit more, okay? And raise your hand if you entered seminary because that you wanted to be a change agent. So how many guys said I'm going to seminary because I want to be a change agent? Okay, we got fewer hands this time, right? We've still got one or two, but we've got much fewer hands, right? The point here is that we're walking onto unfamiliar ground. We're walking on the paths for which you may feel unprepared, or you just flat out don't want to do it because you feel like this isn't what I entered seminary for. And I think we want to start in that place and begin and talk about why it's essential, what it means to be a change agent and why it's essential. Okay. So we'll start with this little 3-minute video that'll help give us a very simple model to think from.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question. We're hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Okay, so if we could, we'll see in a second the next slide, which just gives us a very simple graphic idea, which is the idea that you're either above the line or below the line. And if I were to ask you, who's above the line, who's below the line, we'd all want to say that we're above the line. What the reality is that we move above and below the line constantly, even in a day. So for example, you may say morning mass and be above the line. You come in and receive some mail in the office that brings you below the line. You go to lunch with someone that takes you above the line. You have some difficult conversation with someone in the afternoon that brings you below the line, and so forth. So it's not a permanent state. The key thing is, however, is to recognize what's crucial here is to recognize that we move up and above the line and below the line, and to be conscious of it. Oftentimes we move from one to the other and we're not really conscious of where we are. So the locating yourself is a crucial dimension of this, and saying, hey, where am I? Because if you're below the line and you're in a meeting where that calls for you to be collaborative, creative, innovative, and connect to others, well, below the line is going to make you you're going to be in a place where you're closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Not helpful, right? So one thing is the ability to say, hey, where am I? Notice it, and then begin to notice the things that help you to move above the line, whatever that is. It might be just a very simple prayer that you say, or some other type of thing, a few deep breaths, whatever it is that helps move you back above the line, because that's where you want to be. But you can't do that if you're not aware of it. So the self-awareness is absolutely crucial in this. Okay, I also want to say a thing about the committed to being right. That has nothing to do with church teaching and doctrine. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about when we say committed to being right is be committed to being right. We're gonna have lots of conversations about the planning process and how it should go and who should be involved and all that type of thing. And we all know people for whom they've got to be right about everything. They've got to be right about in any details of the planning process. They've got to be right about any detail, anything to do with the Bengals. They've got to be right about what's the best steakhouse in town. They've got to be right. They just simply have to be right. And that keeps them below the line because it doesn't allow them to be collaborative. It doesn't mean that it doesn't allow them to let new ideas in and so forth. So having said all that, I just want to hold this as a very simple concept for you, and one that I hope that you take through your days, and just every once in a while, 2-3 times a day, just ask yourself, hey, am I above the line or below the line? Or you walk out of a difficult meeting, am I above the line or below the line? You're about to go into a difficult meeting, am I above the line or below the line? Or something really good happens, I'm above the line. How do I hold on to that? What kind of things can I do that will help me to stay above the line? Okay. I know I'm going a little bit off here, but is it possible to do the poll now that has to do with the above and below the line? Otherwise, we'll do it in the normal sequence. Okay. So as you think about the key components of the planning process, ask yourself, are you more above the line or below the line? The things that you've heard up to this point, all the information you received about the planning process, it's an anonymous survey, just interested. Are you above the line, or more? Or do you tend to be more above the line about this, or do you tend to be more below the line? And your honesty is the most important thing, because that's going to let us know where guys are, and and that's going to be really helpful information. So if you could click the two options and then hit submit. Okay, and once we've got all of the answers, we'll see the results. If there's anybody who's having difficulty, please let us know, but it's basically just a very simple survey. Okay, what's interesting is that these results are almost identical to what we had yesterday, in terms of about 60% being above the line and about 38% being below the line. For the guys who are, I appreciate your honesty in both fronts. For the guys who are below the line, that's not an insignificant number. That's basically 4 out of 10. That's good. So it's going to be really important for you to articulate, as we talked about before, what's going to help you move above the line. Because what we don't want to have happen, and will be very damaging to the process, is if 4 and 10 priests continue to stay below the line as we go through the process. Okay. How about the next, if we can move on to the next slide. So this is, I think, one of the most important slides that we've talked about, because it's the essential role of priest in leading change. And as I said, many of you didn't sign up to be a change agent. You may not know what it means to be a change agent. A change agent is simply someone who helps move change forward, right? And why do priests have an essential role? Number one, you are the most credible person in the parish. Now, someone on one of these days raised the question and said, well, I've only been in my parish for 2 years, so I don't really know the people that well. I don't know how credible I am. You're more credible than anybody else who comes to the parish from outside the parish. They've seen you every Sunday. You've baptized and married their children. You've buried their parents and aunts and uncles. You may not have done it for the whole parish. You may not have the deep ties, but you're much more credible than someone from outside, say someone from the archdiocese or wherever, who comes in, who they've never seen before, and who's there for 90 minutes. So people are looking to you, and when I say credible, I mean that they'll come to you and they'll say, Father, what's this whole thing about? Is this for real? Should we be involved in this? Is this just going to blow over? And you have to be very careful about your answers. Because if you just say, oh, it's another archdiocesan thing or something like that, it's done. It's done. You know, they figure, well, Father, he's a priest. He knows what's going on. If he doesn't think it's a big deal, then we don't think it's a big deal. Second, people take their cues from you and your behavior. So people, as I said, because you're credible, people are looking for you, and they're looking at your behavior. So in meetings, if you're sitting in the back of the room, if you're looking disengaged, if you've got your head in your hands, those types of things all communicate to people that this is not where you want to be. And so they're taking their cues verbally and non-verbally from you about the importance of this project. Okay. The other thing is, you know the local reality in the parish better than anyone else. And again, you may not have been there as long, but for people in the archdiocese, you know more about the parish than anybody in the archdiocese knows about the parish. And so you play what I kind of call a linchpin kind of role. You play this linchpin role in which you, this linchpin role in which you're both kind of from above and below. But the people in the parish are looking to you from one side, and they're saying, tell us about this planning process and what should we think about it. And people in the archdiocese will come to you and say, tell us about the people in your parish, and where are they, and are they on board, and what do they need to hear, or what help or support do they need? The only person who can really answer both of those questions is you. And that makes you an absolutely essential person. And I will tell you, in the diocese that we worked across the country, processes like this do not succeed unless the priests are on board with it. So there's a moment here for you to really look inside. And then lastly, you're the person who's the best informed about the change process. So again, your folks are going to be coming to you asking their questions about what is this, what does this mean, and so forth. Your answers are really important. Okay. So if we think about this as a conversion process, there's always temptations in conversion. And so I want to walk through what some of the things that will tempt you as you attempt to move into this conversion to really embracing the planning process. And when I say the planning process, that may make it sound very organizational or bureaucratic. It's really about how to bring the mission of Christ about in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. And so the temptations in this and leading change is, number one, I wasn't trained for this. Nobody in seminary ever talked to me about this, and every single one of these, if you look at them 1 through 8, are a temptation to decide to not be active in the process. I wasn't trained for this, so therefore I'd like to help, but I can't because I don't know enough about it, so I'm out of here. The second one is make sure our parish or parishes win, right? We're not interested in the full archdiocese. They can do what they want to, as long as we get what we want, as long as we stay open, as long as we continue to be able to do what's important to us, then we win. And therefore, I don't have to be part of the entire process. I just have to focus on my parish or my parishes. I can't partner with the other pastors. There are other guys in my grouping in my region, I can't partner with. There's stuff that goes back between me and this guy or that guy, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, or his theology and ecclesiology are completely opposite to mine. Therefore, I can't do it, and therefore, I'm going to check out. I'll show up, and check out may mean I'll show up at every single meeting, but my heart won't be there, right? I really won't have made the conversion over. Number 4 is it's overwhelming. This is just too big. I don't feel like I have the tools. I don't feel like I've got what I need. It's overwhelming. Number 5, it's just another archdiocesan program. And excuse me. It's always a sign that I'm talking too much if I have to go to the water. Just another archdiocesan program, right? I've seen other programs come and go. This is another one. It's not worth investing my time in because we know what happens to big archdiocesan programs. They just kind of fade away. So I'm going to just, again, I may be there at all the meetings, but I'm not going to really invest in them. A 6th, which is a really personal and important and valid question, is what will happen to me? What's going to happen personally to me? Where am I going to get assigned? Where am I going to go? I like where I am. I don't want to move. And there isn't an answer to that question at this point. What will happen to me? There's not a clear answer to that. So this can become a preoccupation, and that preoccupation ultimately can lead you to focus simply on yourself and not the larger process. 7, my role is just to empower my people. Sounds really good, except for the fact that my role to empower my people can turn into, it's their parish, it's their church, they've been here longer than I have, they'll be here when I'm gone, therefore I don't need to do anything. It's up to them to step forward and make their voice heard about what's important. as remember we talked about you being the linchpin and the person who connects the archdiocese to the people, who has the crucial information. If you do that, you're actually not serving your people. So, but it's another way to escape. And lastly, it's already decided what I do doesn't matter. Another great excuse to step away and to check out from the entire process. Okay, so these are the different temptations, and I'd like you to think about which one you're most prone to. As a matter of fact, we have a poll for you right here. So you're only picking one. Which of these temptations will be your biggest challenge? And they're the same ones that we just went through. I'd ask you to complete the poll and then hit submit. Okay, so far and away, the single biggest one is it's overwhelming, which is close to 50% of the respondents. The only other ones that hit double digits was I wasn't trained for this and make sure our parish wins, and that's 11% on each one of those. But it's overwhelming is the one that is far and away the greatest temptation. It was also the strongest temptation when we did this yesterday. Okay? So that gives us a sense of where guys are, and I think it also gives us a sense of the types of things we need to do to help this feel less overwhelming for you. Can we move on to the next slide? Okay, thank you. So then what is your role in leading change? So the first and foremost is to be open to the Spirit. If you remember going all the way back to the conversation we had about communio, we talked about that things are going to happen that are beyond your control, that you don't have a rule book for, and the thing that you need the proper response in those situations is to be open and responsive, to put yourselves in the hands of the Spirit and allow yourself to be vulnerable and for the answers to arise for you, which leads to number two. It's okay not to know the answers. There's not an expectation that you know every answer, and that's why it probably feels overwhelming at this point. And it's going to continue to feel overwhelming because this is a very large project. And you'll know you'll get the answers. The answers will be provided or will manifest themselves, is probably a better way to say it, as you go along through the process. It's okay not to know them. So when a parishioner comes up and says, well, Father, with this whole thing, is blank going to happen, or what's going to happen to blank, or that type of thing. My mother was baptized on that altar and she's 84, and what's going to happen, and that type of thing. The best answer, if you don't know the answer, is I don't know the answer. You could say, I don't know the answer. I'll do my very best to get it for you, but it's okay not to know the answer. Far worse is to wing it and say, oh, don't you worry. That altar, that church is going to be there, or that altar is going to be there, or whatever is going to be there for your grandmother or your mother, or this or that program is going to continue to be in place, or whatever. Because as we go through this process, we simply don't know exactly what the outcomes are going to be. And what's really, really important, as the Archbishop talked about, reading his remarks so that everybody hears the same thing, is that it's consistency of message. If somebody hears one thing from you and they hear something different from someone else in your deanery about the same program or building or whatever it is, now we've got confusion, people getting frustrated, people with different sets of expectations. Third, continually locate yourself. We talked about that multiple times a day. Am I above or below the line? 4, just notice that you are the message. We talked about this as well. Your words, your presence, your body language, people are taking their cues from you on all of these. The 5th is this process to the outcome is a journey. It's not an event. It's not a one-time thing. So it's a path that you're going to walk, and you're going to walk it with your people. And what they're looking for is number 6, is that you accompany them. So despite the fact that you might not know the answers, despite the fact that you might not want to be there, your people need you to be there. And what is completely and consistently apparent in the diocese we work with has been those places where the priest has accompanied his people. The outcome for that parish turns out to be much better than the parishes where the priest is checked out. Commit to number 7. Commit to the process. Commit to what we're about. That again, I think goes back to some of the other things that we said. That your investment, your personal investment, and this is where it comes down to your own conversion, because there may be things that are hard for you to think about doing. Commit to that is absolutely crucial. And I invite you to make that commitment and do the types of things that might be necessary mentally, spiritually, to get yourself to that point. And then lastly, as we said, your role in leading change. You're the most credible person. People are going to take their cues from you. So I think you've got a last poll that's coming up around these, and which aspect of these 8 roles of leading change is the most important to you?